Awesome. So Brian, you mind kicking it over to the next slide for me?
You got it.
Thank you. Awesome. Well, welcome everyone to our webinar on navigating cash flow. We're so excited to have you all here. Today, we're going to go through quite a few different things, but we want to kind of first welcome everybody, and we just couldn't wait to get here to this day. We've been very excited about this class, and we've been working on it, and we just can't wait to tell you a little bit more about it. And so the idea for a webinar popped up, and we couldn't be more thankful that we had such great feedback from everybody that they're excited about this. So we'll go ahead and get started, but I did want to start with some ground rules. Brian, if you don't mind clicking over for me, that'd be great.
You got it.
Perfect. So just to kind of go over some general information regarding the webinar, it will be recorded, as you heard just a moment ago. Our goal with that is that in case anybody couldn't be able to attend, or hopefully if you found this helpful and maybe you wanted to share it with some of your coworkers, we're going to be talking about a team and getting the team involved. So hopefully you can get your team involved a little bit more with this webinar as well. Questions are definitely welcome and encouraged. So as soon as we can get chat going, we'd love to have that. So if anybody has any questions as we go through, that would be great. And definitely feel free to ask all of those. We'll also make sure that we can get any questions at the end. But if anything pops up, don't hesitate to ask questions throughout. Afterwards, we'll also be sending a follow-up email. So inside of that email, we'll include a copy of this recording. So you'll get a video of the recording, as well as a copy of the PDF of the slides. I'm a huge advocate of this because I'm a big note taker. It's how I definitely take notes. And I always love to kind of have a copy of the slides afterwards, especially there's a couple of them that'll be really good reminders for you as we go forward. Go ahead, Brian, if you don't mind.
Yeah. Yep.
Thank you. So first I'd like to kind of introduce Brian and I a little bit, and then hopefully as Whitney's working on chat, we can get to know a little bit more about you as well. My name is Kim Puffley. I see so many familiar names inside of our participants. So great to see so many friends out there, and it's great to meet some of you new folks as well. But for those of you that don't know me, my name is Kim Puffley, and I'm the Executive Director of Educational Development and Consulting. I've been with the association for a little over 5 years now, and my role is to work in the educational portion of the business and to create classes and to also run a lot of the amazing courses that we've already got. I also work directly with retailers in a consulting role, so I travel out to retailers. A few of you are on here, so it's great to see you. And I also kind of work in all aspects of the business, so anywhere that I can possibly help. I started in the industry over 30 years ago at this point. So I started as a nights and weekends part-time cashier at my parents' hardware store and worked my way up in the business until they sold the store, and then stayed on with the new owners and ultimately became the general manager overseeing operations of 7 hardware stores. So I love this industry and I'm super passionate about this industry. And so I'm so excited to be able to connect with all of you. We're excited to share about the cash flow, but we're here for you outside of that as well. So as any questions pop up or anything pops up, please consider adding both myself and Brian to your network, whether that's on LinkedIn, through email, or through text. We're excited to be able to connect with you. I'm going to have Brian introduce himself next, but Brian's a humble guy, so I'm going to brag on him just a little before I send it over to him. Brian and I met about a year ago, and I immediately knew that we needed to work together. Our first conversation, we were just immediately talking and said, we need to work together immediately. So one of the amazing things was we had the ability to kind of do this class. Before that, Brian was also a 2009 Young Retailer of the Year. And so I love to give that shout out because he's doing amazing things. And I can't wait for him to tell you a little bit more about some of the things he's been doing since then and about his career and why he will be a perfect instructor for this course. So Brian, I'll kick it over
Thank
to
you.
you now. Sorry to brag on
Thanks,
you.
Kim. So I'm glad the chat is going. So while we got this and I'm talking about myself, don't pay attention to it too much. You just put in what city and state you're in. And also, I personally, being a baseball fan, want to know if you are a baseball fan, your favorite team. Uh-oh, we might have a
The Philly, we got
oh boy,
Pittsburgh.
a Philly or maybe I don't know. I'd like to think it's maybe a Pirates fan
Oh,
there.
yeah,
Okay.
Pirates. There you go. Yeah.
LSU Tigers,
Ooh,
definitely down south
go
Louisiana.
Cubbies.
Dodgers, Rangers. I like this.
Oreo.
Oreos. Okay.
Okay.
Ruckersville, Virginia. Not that far from me. Awesome. So,
Welcome.
I've been in the retail, hardware business for 30 years. Well, 25 plus years. And just, let's not make myself older right off the bat. But anyways, now I've gone into consulting for the hardware retail industry, and it really just started from, um, identifying specific pain points that I had for myself. And, you know, really what it is, there were three areas that I felt I needed help in, and those are the areas that I try to focus more off. These are like the soft skills of working with your people problem, your profit or marketing issues, and then also strategic planning. And my whole goal is to basically is to help not businesses not just grow, but actually scale. And so that there's a big difference. If you grow, you can grow. How many know you can also grow your stress? But I'm talking about growing your business and actually taking yourself out of it. And we do that basically by either consulting or offering fractional executive services, which is like, hey, I am too overwhelmed to do lead up the charge on the marketing. Can you come on in for a couple months, get the ball rolling, and then pass it on? And that's what I really enjoy doing. That's been a lot of fun. So that's me bragging about myself a little bit. And who do we have in chat there?
We
What do
have
we have
folks
for
from
teams?
all over across the US and up into Canada. We've got Blue Jays, we've got all sorts of a lot of Ohio here. We've got a lot of the Orioles as well. So so many folks are jumping on. Texas Rangers. I just went to a Rangers game this year for the first time ever. It was definitely no Wrigley Field. That was an amazing, amazing facility for sure. So quite a few folks on here. So that's awesome. That's good. Well,
All
perfect.
right,
Yeah,
awesome. And
thank you.
and
So
I
yeah,
have to put in the fact that I'm a Mets fan,
oh
and
yeah.
I am ecstatic over the fact that they beat the Yankees for 4 games. So if there's any Yankees fans, I humbly apologize. Let us have our moment. So there we
That's
go. So awesome. Great. Glad to have everybody there. So
think we'll jump
so
into our
go
goals
ahead.
for today. Yeah, I
Yeah,
think what we can do
hop in.
is we definitely want to kind of get through several things today. So we'll kind of share with you what our goals for today will be. Is first, we want to give you a sneak peek of the NHPA cash flow course and tell you a little bit more about what that is. This webinar will share some of the details, but we also wanted this webinar to be really informative for you as well, so that you could be learning as much as you can possibly to take away today, even if you're not available to attend the course. We wanted this to add value for you, but we wanted you to know a little bit more about the course itself. We'll talk about specifically cash flow and getting a better understanding of what cash flow is, and really importantly, what cash flow is not, right? So we have a lot of conversations, and it's oftentimes when I'm talking with a lot of the retailers I work with, and from my personal experience, there's these horror stories about cash flow and the pains of them. And so we'll kind of identify some of that. And then we'll also talk about 3 cash flow questions to ask to really help you get to the root of potentially where the issue might be and what the issue might be, because there's a lot of different factors that can get you there. And then we want to give you some tools that you can start using immediately. So we'll cover the 5 E's to help you take action today with your team. And we'll even talk a little bit more about what it means, to involve a few other folks on your team. But I think first Brian wants to ask you a question before I launch a little bit about the course.
Yeah, we are. Um, let's see here. Yeah, quick question on this one, just to throw it in the chat since it's working. If you had, and let's put the numbers aside for right now, but let's just get a little pie in the sky and dream. If you had an extra 200K in your business, what would you do with it? And just throw it in the chat. Maybe you'd do something personal. Maybe you'd give yourself a raise. Maybe you'd expand it, a department, open up another store. Go ahead, throw that in there. Let's just see. Had
Sarah,
more
that's great.
bathrooms.
Yeah, more bathrooms. Sarah, that's so great. When my parents built this store, that we built 1 bathroom,
Pay
and
off
we ended up
loans.
having a fire at the store, and they rebuilt it, and it was the first thing we changed. 2 bathrooms, definitely. Brian, if you don't mind jumping to that next slide while everybody is loading this up, that
You
would be
got
great.
it.
Get everybody
Yep.
talking a little bit about the course. as you're loading in your thoughts, I just wanted to tell you a little bit more about the course itself. It will be held in Indianapolis, Indiana on October 15th and 16th. The way it's designed is we really want to be able to bring folks together to learn as much as they can and have actionable items to take home with them to implement in their business. This course started like so many of our courses that NHPA did, which was by feedback from retailers, ideas from retailers, stories from retailers, and pain points where they said, can you help us learn more about this? Can you pull together the best resources from the best stores and figure out how we can do a better job at this? So we're going to work together to truly create that roadmap to true financial freedom. The way it works is we'll have some structured sessions. So over the 2 days, we'll have sessions both days that will cover a variety of topics, which I'll touch briefly on. And then we'll also have roundtables, which I'm telling you are so impactful when we can get so many different retailers in a room and share ideas and share pain points and share successes. It's really helpful. It immediately helps you build that network as well. So you will have plenty of networking opportunities throughout the class, at the breaks, during dinners. We do a networking event one of the nights as well. And then after the sessions and roundtables and networking, we really wanted to make sure that there would be actionable items for you to bring home what you learned in the course. So we are adding 6 weeks of virtual follow-up to this program. And so after the course, we'll meet for follow-up sessions to really dive into what you've learned and how it's working in your business. How is it implementing? What roadblocks are you hitting? How can we help? What maybe is a success for somebody else? And we'll be able to continue to support each other through that. With that, we know we'll be able to have some real life actionable takeaways and solutions to help the business.
Yeah, yeah. And if I could just interrupt there. I mean, when Kim and I were talking about doing this, really the key was how can we just absolutely maximize the ROI that you would get from having this doing this course and also minimize the amount of time that it would take. And so the 6 weeks afterwards are really just meant to be, man, that's your lab time, instead of, with the science and, instead of the class, we're just diving right into it, seeing how it's working. And then it's a definite a feedback time. Well, this is working good. This isn't okay. Then let's focus on this part. So it's really exciting to be able to do that 1 hour sessions each week so that we can see how it's working and how it's working for you and really get the wheels turning there. So yeah.
Awesome. Perfect. Can you jump to that? Okay. So just so you know, as for the course, just to give you a quick overview of it, it's going to really be addressed to be focusing on both aspects of cash flow management, and both are incredibly important. So we'll really talk heavily about minimizing expenses, which is so important. But at the same time, we need to be focusing on maximizing that revenue. So building it as much as revenue as we can coming in and controlling those expenses to give us the healthiest bottom line that we possibly can. If you don't mind kicking to the next slide, I'm going to talk a little bit about the sessions. There's some additional information on our site, but I wanted you to know just a little more about them. So the first session is laying the foundation. So it's really understanding a little bit better about cash flow, both external issues, so things like cash shortages and maybe some expense issues, but also internal things. One of the things we hear a lot about when it comes to cash flow is the stress, the burnout, the overwhelm, the fatigue that comes with it. So we're going to talk about that, the real side of the issues of cash flow. And then we'll talk about improving financial acumen, understanding your financial statements better, and really being able to look at those documents, so balance sheets, cash flow statements, all of your P&Ls, and find the issues that you have, and then we can help you find some of the solutions, so it'll make it easier. We'll talk about everybody's favorite topic, budgeting. Okay, I know it's not. I know every time I say the word budget, everybody gets this like chill down their back, but it's okay. Like even if you have zero budgets when you roll into class, we're going to be able to help because budgets are really important, but they're hard to start. So we're going to help set some achievable goals and help you bring together some budgets that will be helpful in areas like marketing or payroll and a few other opportunities. If we can get better at budgeting, then we can really start preparing for any unexpected financial challenges. And I think that's just so important. We'll talk about inventory management and and how important it is to make sure that we can manage our inventory properly so that we can meet demand, but without having a crazy excess amount of inventory. So the wall of green totes that are left over from reset, or I think for at least in the Midwest, the last few years, all of the extra snowblower. How do we kind of manage some of those things? We'll also talk about some vendor negotiations and how you can do a little bit better with that. And so some of the things that we can do to ultimately identify where we have some inefficiencies in our inventory. Um, we'll talk about smart or speedy receivables and happy payables. So how can we accelerate cash flow through our business through efficient invoicing and really kind of figuring out how we can keep those good relationships and keep our business healthy by managing the flow of cash in a timely manner as fast as we can. We'll touch on some of the marketing, both short term and long term, which both are incredibly important. What are some things we can do in the short term to ultimately boost and have some quick revenue that can come into the business? So what are some events or ideas or things that we can do to drive some traffic into the store? How can we create that pipeline of customers that are coming in? And long term, how do we build that customer loyalty and make sure that our loyal customers continue to come back and we continue to grow new customers within our store so that we can really sustain some of our marketing success? And of course, we have to talk about accountability throughout the course because we have to keep our eye on those key KPIs or those key performance indicators to get a gauge on the financial health of the business. So we'll talk about what works, what we've seen. We'll share stories of stores that are really successful and that are finding ways to put practical steps into place to ultimately have financial health in their business. And of course, we're not going to forget to talk about the pain points, the hard parts. So we ultimately need to make sure that we address those hard-hitting challenges. So anyone who's in the course can bring those in and talk about it to say, yeah, it's great to say we're going to budget, but ... right? So we all know what ... is and all of those parts that are hard. So we'll talk through them. We'll have roundtables and we'll tackle the hard stuff. We'll also talk about really some of the challenges of cash flow. So on season, off season, what's happening? What if there's market volatility? What if there is economic shifts, right? We're seeing this happen all the time. We need to be prepared to adjust so that ultimately, regardless of what happens around us, we can build in some planning to ultimately have a healthy financial support of the business. And then, as Brian and I were just talking about, those virtual follow-up sessions will be key. They'll be our test lab where we're utilizing your store and testing thing and looking for some real success within the business. So again, really important deep dive into sessions. Happy to go into more detail with those after this session, or if you have any additional questions, we would definitely be happy to do that. Just a couple quick things on the course. Obviously, we want to make sure that you have concrete methods to identify and reduce expenses. So we've got some really good tools so that it's not just something where you fix it one time and then in a year from now you're hitting the same problem. We've got some time-tested tools that you can ultimately put into place to control your expenses. And the same with driving revenue. We're going to give you some tips, some tricks, a lot of different things that you can ultimately implement to drive customer traffic to your store, to increase that average ticket, to drive net sales. So a lot of different things, including some margin support as well. So our goal is to give you the tools and the time to make sure that you can be as successful as you can possibly be. If you're interested in learning a little bit more about that class, you can definitely scan this QR code here, or if you're interested in signing up for the class, we definitely have that option available as well. And I know that today's session is not just about the course in Indianapolis, but we did want to give you kind of a bigger scope of what that would be. And again, we can also definitely kick that over. But now we want to kick it over to Brian, who's going to give us a sneak peek of one of the sessions that you would see in Indianapolis. And he's going to share some incredible tools about how you can drive change in your business. So I'm going to kick it back over to
All
Brian.
right.
And
Thank
Whitney
you.
did let me know that if you have any questions, to go ahead and raise your hand, and we will go
Yeah,
ahead and
absolutely.
unmute you so you can talk at that point. So
Yeah,
Brian?
for sure. Yeah, and if you don't feel comfortable putting in talking or whatever, just throw it in the chat. I won't be able to see it, but Kim, Whitney, you'll be able to see it, and just stop me, because let's make this conversational. One thing that we and Kim alluded to it a little bit with the with the webinar and then talking webinar here and then also our course upcoming is the fact that we're going to stay away from a lot of the typical cash flowy stuff. We're going to actually dig right into it because it's not about just evaluating the numbers. It's about implementing this and driving your business forward. So that's really what our key focus is and our passion is for even doing this webinar and then the upcoming course. So number one problem in small business, almost 90% of small business failures happen because of cash flow problems. This is real. It's an issue, and it is something that is just epidemic all over. Kim, you were just talking about that. Just what was it yesterday that you were talking with a store owner? Why don't you share that?
Yeah, so just this week, I had 2 different folks reach out, and they were in that we all know that feeling, right? I remember very vividly going through this, especially with my family business, is saying they're at that moment where they were almost in panic, and they said, "I have too much inventory, my expenses are too high, the business is slow," and it's like, "Okay, hang on," like, it's like we have to breathe, and the problem is that, oftentimes, especially with cash flow, we don't wanna talk about it until it's kind of too late, or it's like that's we're feeling the stress. And so that's where we really talk about those internal feelings where it's just like, first of all, they both thought, well, I should know how to answer these questions. And I said, well, why would you know? Right? It's okay if you don't. And I think that a lot of times everyone just assumes that everybody else has it all the way figured out. But the reality is that 90% of the businesses do not. Right. And so it's a real challenge. And that's why for both of them, I said, I've learned what I've learned in cash flow from learning from others and kind of diving in and learning new things. And so I think for me, that's such an important part to say, hey, it's okay. Let's take a breath and let's dive into what some of these issues might be, and then we can go from there. And I think that's what's one of the most important lessons is no matter what, you're not alone in this.
Yeah. Yeah, two things. Number one, it's a real problem. Number two, it's not a unique problem. It is a problem with so many of our small businesses. And so it's just something that we gotta solve, and that's it. Um, Richard Branson, with the Virgin Empire, he said, "Never take your eye off the cash flow. It's the lifeblood of business." But I'd be interested to know real quickly, what is the problem with this statement? What's a problem of this statement here? If you throw it in chat, what immediately comes up in your mind where you're like, "Hey, yeah, that's right," but anything from anybody? For me, it was, uh, the problem is as owners/managers, we've only got 2 eyes. We can't be looking at cash flow all the time, and one of the key problems is that cash flow is quiet, and we usually don't realize that it's an issue until January, February, March. I'm from the Northeast, so those are like the times when it was awful, and we sort of waited for it, just to hit. And one of I remember it having with my parents' business, it was always like the post-Christmas depression almost. Now all the bills come in, the revenue slows, now we're have issues. So it is always that time. And so, anyways, Richard Branson said that, and then Jack Welch, one of my heroes, he said, if I had to run a company on 3 measures, it would be customer satisfaction, employee satisfaction, and cash flow. Which I thought was kind of interesting because all 3 of those are incredibly quiet issues, soft skills, and are tough to measure right off the bat. You have to dig into it and really be committed to that. But that's what Jack Welch said. So right now here, I have a quick question I want to ask. And what image comes to mind when I say cash flow? So I want to know, is it a cartoon image of Scrooge McDuck? Is it Jerry Maguire saying, "Show me the money"? What is it? What comes to mind there? And let me know, Kim, what you see there on the chat.
Yeah, so, there's a couple like, I don't know if it's Diana or Deanna, so I'm gonna do both because 'cause I'm sorry if I got it wrong, but she had made like, it's not just cash flow, like you were saying, there's many different factors, and we're just getting a few other ones in. Sean put, um, Robert, I don't know how to say the last name, I always say it wrong, Kiyosaki.
Yosaki,
Yeah, I can't, yeah, I always say it wrong.
Kiyosaki. Yeah.
Yeah. The
Oh,
rich
the rich dad. Yes,
poor thing.
yes,
I know. It's like, I know what it is. I just can't say the bit.
yes. That's who I was thinking
God.
of. I love
Yeah.
that guy. Yeah, absolutely. That's
Yeah.
great. That's
Yeah.
good. Okay. So what is cash flow? It is, and the reason I'm saying this is to so that we can definitely simplify it down. Cash flow, just simply put, it's a total amount of money moving in and out of your business. And I'm saying that for two reasons so that we can avoid this failure, two failures, and that's a failure of hyper focusing because we tend to focus when we hear cash flow, we focus on 90% of our energies go to cutting expenses, and reducing expenses on that. And that's important, but that's only part of the cash flow. That's a cash outflow. And so the failure of hyper focus, and number two, the failure of overcomplicating things, the overcomplication. So we tend to overcomplicate and then fall into the dreaded paralysis by analysis, which is where, oh man, I got to dig into the ledgers, I got to dig into the balance sheet and this and the income statement. I got to wait for the accountant to get me back this and that. No, and then what happens is you just end up forgetting about it and not wanting to do it. So, one note, we also don't always focus on those issues that have the biggest impact. It tends to be those issues that we think are causing cash flow issues are tend to be more emotional sometimes. And so we'll focus in on things that actually don't have the biggest impact on our business. So we want to stay away from that. So uh few things. Cash flow is not unfixable. It's not untreatable, and it's not a death sentence. I remember that because my parents, they called me up when I was doing my internship. I went to school for investment banking, and I left my one internship because they said, "Listen, we're going to close up the store. We're going to close up the family business. We can't do it. This and that." They truly felt it was unfixable, untreatable, and it was a death sentence. So it is not. And my dad pun of the day, which my kids would be completely embarrassed about if I said this, but cash flow is not a can that should be kicked down the road. It's a can in New York. I'm used to redemption. So it's a can that should be redeemed and gotten cash for. So that's my dad pun. And if you have any other dad puns that you think it would be better, then go ahead, put that in the chat. And if you don't like it, just don't put that in the chat. So, three questions to ask your team. And what we're going to do is, I want to have number one, we're going to imply or assume that you are going to create a team for accountability. So, if it's just you, that's fine, but get another person just to keep the accountability and the process going. All right, three questions to ask. Why? To get you laser focused in on only one cash flow problem that you're going to solve. Too often, and then two, this is to prevent overwhelm from happening. So we want to focus in on one problem so that you can get it accomplished. And number two, we want to keep you from overwhelming it. Oh man, because instead of putting out one major fire, you're trying to throw a little bit of water on each fire and none of them actually get extinguished. So um, if you do clearly identify more than one cash flow problem area, then just prioritize them. And we're going to go into the 5 E's so that you can prioritize it. So any questions or anything there, Kim?
Nope, we're good to go. Yep.
Okay. All right. So the first question is very basically, is this a revenue problem? All right. The examples being, is cash type because of seasonal drop in sales, long-term revenue trending down, that is year over year revenue dropping, margin, is your margin not keeping up with your expenses, or is it just the fact that, it's okay, but our daily traffic count is low? So those are some examples of revenue problems. Second is, well, maybe it's an expense problem. The expense problem, and I'm trying to stay away from these typical cash flowy words. So let's break this right on down to something to keeping it simple and words that we're all familiar and comfortable with. These are operating expenses, basically. We're talking payroll, inventory, receivables. These are generally tend to be recurring problems that happen all year long. But the good thing is that once they get solved, because they're a recurring problem that's eliminated, it has a significant compounding effect on your bottom line. So, and then the third one is this a financing problem? Well, it could be. And when I say financing problem, just think of overhead expenses. Let's put that all into one category. So, are we talking rent? Are we talking mortgage, short-term or long-term loan repayments, or even a line of credit? So is it more of a financing problem? I had one client um, who had a significant debt, and he was like, "Why can't I take any money?" Oh, I mean, this is crazy. And I said, "Well, one of the issues is you're trying to repay the debt super quick, and that's great. However, just know you can't do both here. So you may want to pick and choose that and talk to renegotiate your loan." So those are the three areas: uh, revenue problem, expense problem, or is it a financing problem. Um, really be focused on just one at a time so you can hammer it out and get it done. Again, prevent overwhelm, and then to focus in and nail it the first time. Any questions? Any thoughts?
Not questions.
Anybody know right off the bat if they got one of those three that they want to tackle?
Yeah, which one is the first on your list that you're thinking through? When I was talking with a couple retailers I was working with this week on cash flow, we were kind of talking through all of that, and we said, yeah, sometimes we have all three, right? It's hard to pick
Yeah,
which one is the worst. I think that goes back. Thank you, Diana. It goes back to looking at that and saying kind of which one it is. That's also why it's kind of important to have that team. Sometimes it may be that I'm going to lean in and focus on one area, and somebody may lean and focus on another. One of the things that I was talking through with them is to say, hey, let's look at where we can make the biggest impact quickly. For one of the stores I was working with, expense, expense, expense. We're seeing a lot of that in the chat and saying, hey, how can we look at this? What are some measures that we can ultimately put into place to control these expenses? So we're hearing a lot of that with payroll, with store expense, just kind of looking at what are some of the things that we can do to control this. And if it's revenue, maybe it's looking at driving sales, looking at your customer count. How can we drive some average sales? So there's a lot of different aspects on where we need to go. We're hearing a lot of expense. We're seeing customer count is down. So it's where do we
yeah,
need to put our focus and kind of drive in that? And so if we can identify one of those areas, it's saying, okay, I'm going to put forth some effort, over the next series of time to say, I'm going to, so for Susan, like where are we seeing the customer count down? What can we do to look at it a little bit differently? Let's look at our customers and say, who hasn't been shopping, right? Can we look at who was here and who isn't shopping? How can we get some quick marketing turnaround to try to drive some traffic and put together a few different things as well. So it's definitely going to make a difference. It gives you that avenue to kind of choose which direction you're going. We're talking about weather, we're talking about customer count, talking
yeah,
about expenses and chat.
yeah,
So definitely hitting on all of those for sure. So you've
yeah,
identified that, right, Brian? And then what are
yeah,
some solutions
absolutely.
you have to
Yeah.
kind of take that next
And
step forward?
and then just brainstorm, like, with the weather. Yeah, you can't control the weather, but how can we minimize the impact that weather would have on this? So is it, oh, we're doing these events, but then the weather is it can be bad. And so, okay, well, what's one way of get taking weather out of the picture? Well, you could actually try doing a webinar, for instance. I mean, as uncommon and unpopular as that may be, a lot of your people want to see more of you, but make it easy for them. So anyways, all right, let's hop into the 5 E's to easy implementation. By now, I hope you see our passion, that it is not just about theory. It's not about staying in the back of the office with ledgers piled high and spreadsheets printing out, and then going through this and going through that. Now, there's a time and a place for that, but it's much less than you would think. It's just meant to measure and then start implementing the change. So here are the 5 E's for easy implementation. Because after all, if you can't implement it, it really doesn't matter, and it's just a good uh, conversation at a cocktail party. So, um, we touched on this before. Have 2 or 3 people designated to lead your cash flow task force. It's gonna increase accountability. It's actually gonna boost morale too because you're in it together. We don't have time for any of this lone wolf stuff where we feel alone. And I believe I saw a report that said like 80% of small business owners feel alone. And yet and that just blew me away because I was like, "Yeah, I feel that way a lot." Okay? But the fact is, it can't be that way. We have to have a team, 2 to 3 people, let them partake in this and have the joy of actually achieving this great thing that's gonna happen. And, the second thing is, okay, so have a team. The second thing is schedule a meeting every 30 days, or if you already have a leadership meeting set up, integrate it into your leadership meeting. So, let me move on here. And how are we doing on time? Okay. All right, we're doing good. 1, evaluate. Where do I wanna be in 12 months? Don't just say, "Ah, I just we just need to get cash in." If you don't and here's a I don't know if we got any Yankees fans, but even if you're not a Yankees fan, you're gonna be a Yogi Berra fan, right? And he said, "If you don't know where you're going, you'll end up someplace else." And it's just like, "Well, okay, yeah, I guess so, Yogi." You know? So we wanna have a clear destination, uh, outlined. And so set your goals. And of course, make your goal smart. We all know that, but sometimes we can forget about that. I just want to have more cash. Well, make it specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, timely. Do that. And then you'll be, even if you make it small, at least you'll be like, man, okay, that's great. We're headed in the right direction. So, so I want us to just put into chat real quickly. Let's get just to get a little bit personal. What's one goal you'd like to achieve or implement in your business? Okay, what's the one thing that comes to mind when you're like a 12-month goal? Well, yeah, I'd like to be able to be able to afford to take an extra week off, maybe 2 weeks off. I'd like to cut my hours from 70 hours to 40 for a change. What is that? I'd like to be able to have for this. Go ahead, you can throw that in there if you want to. Second one, we'll move right along, is energy. What are we willing to commit and do to get there? So, my point is that we evaluate the cost. If we're doing cash flow, we're evaluating costs and expenses of everything. Evaluate the cost of what you're willing to put out there. I'm not just talking money, yeah, there'll be some expenses incurred with doing this, but time, organizational changes, your workforce changes, and then, of course, your money. But the key is count the cost ahead of time so that you're not surprised and disillusioned as you're going on. So, is the goal a little good? A little good, but a little too much for you to handle? So, or is this perfect, or is it too little? So, just count the cost there. Energy. Next one, third one is endurance. Is this a one and done or a rinse and repeat situation? I don't know if you can tell, but I don't exactly use a rinse and repeat on my hair. That's not a problem that I have. I don't know if anybody else is there, but that's not an issue. So you know what I mean when I say one and done? And obviously, that's just a lot of times one and done problems are finance problems, right? And you get that solved, you get your payments down, then that alleviates things. Or is it a rinse and repeat solution? You may want to start off with a one and done, just to give yourself some traction and to get going. And then the rinse and repeat tend to be ongoing expenses or ongoing revenue programs. Do you want to install a online funnel system, a sales funnel system to generate more revenue, to minimize the weather impact? Well, how can you do that? Well, you do that. You set up your internal sales funnel through email, text messaging, things like that. Anyways, so, rinse and repeat is an ongoing process. Some examples I wrote down here, KPI analysis, inventory valuation, monthly revenue goals, margin improvement, employee payroll analysis, just a few. Any others come to mind? Throw it in chat. Which would you probably think needs to be handled first? Do you have a one and done or a rinse and repeat? And if you want to, put it right there in the chat. Number 4, easy to implement. How can I make the solution simpler for me and my team? It tends to be when we get overwhelmed that we come up with an overwhelming solution. So that's the problem. Oh, I got to do this. And then it's like 50 steps. Okay, simplify it. And my phrase is simplify to solidify. If you can simplify it down to 3, 5 steps, whatever it is, pretty much just guarantee whatever you start off with, you should cut those steps in half and then come back to it and cut the steps in half again. So, and the reason we want to simplify it is because we want to ensure that it's implemented. And then we want to ensure too that it's actually effective and ultimately achieves the goal that you've set for it. Okay. How we doing on time here with my monologue? All right, we're good. All right. End game. How are we going to measure success? Okay, sometimes we're just so consumed about getting some of this done that we forget that we actually have to measure success. One of the biggest problems I had as a small business owner was I never stepped back and truly measured uh, my successes, and I never took a time to truly celebrate it. Instead, I went right on to the next issue, and I didn't. So here's 5 little things I'd like for you to do when I say end game. How are we going to measure success? Number 1, identify. Identify what you'll keep an eye on, and then what changes you'll look for and expect. And so identify that. Number 2 is once you identify and you know what to look for with the results that you want, measure them. Okay, just simply measure it. Okay, yeah, all right, that's good. That's where we want. And then number 3, analyze it. So analyze the results that you're measuring. Okay, don't make it personal. It's not your fault. It's not somebody else's fault. Let's just stick to the numbers there and measure it, analyze the results. Okay, this is good. We're coming along. Great. If you are coming along, when you are coming along, celebrate it. Just number 4, take whatever your celebration is. If it's taking your husband or wife out for a nice little meal or whatever, do that. Celebrate it. And then number 5 is just ask an honest question. Okay, this worked. How can we improve the results or the process so it can work better? Maybe the results aren't so much an issue. It's maybe we just need to simplify this process so it can be habitualized. So, anyways, that's the end game there. So I want to recap this, the 5 E's to easy implementation. But before I do that, let me just pause. Anybody have any questions, thoughts, or Kim, go ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. So we had a couple different thoughts that had kind of come in. Some were saying a personal goal I'd love to have is not to be so stressed all the time about money. I think everyone in this webinar feels that as well, definitely. We're looking for trying to find ways that we can drive revenue when we're up against different areas like weather issues, like it feels like we have no control over that. And then also, how can we put in some of these one and done solutions that we can help us, right? So when it reminds me almost of that initially where it's like we're going to plug the leaks just for a second, take a breath, and then kind of go back and do it. Couple stories that I just wanted to share with that I know are some examples of implementing these down different paths is if there is, let's say, for example, an expense goal. We had a lot of you that said expenses is to say, one of the things that we implemented in some of the stores that I were running was to say, hey, how do we look better at store expenses and money that's going out and we have no control over it? And I remember one time vividly going up and a cashier was cleaning the countertop with Windex brand paper towels that were like paper towels with the Windex built in. And I'm like, my heart's palpitating because I'm like, I think that's a $4 roll of paper towels. And I know like cash flow is tight. And so it was one of those things where like, hey, this cashier had no idea that that was not the right paper towel or something to use. And so we had gone back in and said, we need to put in a permanent solution to avoid having this. And so we evaluated like what was the issue, like we needed to know like who needed to get involved in it, how we're going to make it successful. And so we determined, what was the goal of it, how are we going to get there? And then ultimately we created an approved list that said, no, we buy the case of paper towels, and when you buy the case of paper towels, we get the best deal. And it adds up slowly, right? It goes back to the same thing with expenses of, making sure that we put away our tools correctly so we're not pulling new tools off the shelf. There are a lot of things that we know that we've worked in the industry or worked in the business for a long time that are just kind of stuck in our head. So a lot of times the easy implementation is getting everybody else involved and making sure that we're building in as a part of our plan. It's there. If it's revenue, it's saying, let's narrow that down. Maybe we're having weather issues like, I think Susan had mentioned that weather was affecting the customer traffic. It's like, well, let's look at the customers we do have and looking at average ticket. So in each of those paths, it's saying, what is one thing that I can do? And I go around the 5 E's to make sure that you can ultimately do that. And you can absolutely do that with your personal goals as well, is to set, hey, I need to step back for an hour, or I need to, not do the 70 hours. So how can I put that path together? And I love the idea of just going through those 5 E's to kind of help you do that.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And it isn't, and we touched on this. The fact is, um, just like just like money is the number one thing for couples to argue about, it is the number one thing for businesses and business owners to stress about. And so it turns into something that literally becomes a health issue. So without getting really philosophical about it, it becomes something that it stresses you out. Then you take it home and things like that. I mean, I know because I've been there. It almost lost my family over this part. And that's kind of why, him and I started talking, and I'm so passionate about this. And I'm like, it doesn't have to be this way. And Kim, you're laughing because you're like, we've talked about this so many times, the entrepreneurial philosophy that we have to just buckle down and do it ourselves and put our cowboy boots on, and we are the Lone Ranger. We're the only one. It's not that way. It's not that way. And so, anyways, let me just recap this, and then we'll open it up for questions. I think in just a few. So, anyways, again, the key is we're not telling you, and I hope you know from our focus and our lack of focus right now on the numbers aspect, it is about identifying and implementing. And we want to make it super simple and straightforward. Yeah, we will dig into stuff that you will not believe in the course in October, but that isn't where we want to do what we want to do right now. We want to give you some traction and just be like, yeah, let's tackle this, and just go forward with it. So don't be a Scrooge McDuck in the back, surrounded by your ledgers, lock the door and say, don't let me out for 24 hours. That isn't the key. Isolationism is never a good policy. If you've watched Casablanca, you know that I'm quoting it anyways. So, but the key is implementing change that will lastingly affect your company and your company's bottom line. Create it, make it a cash cow so that now you're constantly putting money into that corporate investment account. And then that is generating extra money. So, anyways, the other thing is have 2 to 3 people. We talked about this, that are going to be on your task force and to help you with the energy, the endurance, the easy to implement part, the end game, and the evaluation. Um, and then schedule a meeting every 30 days. I can't say that enough. If you do not do it, the risk is, so they did a study. After 90 days, anything that was implemented tends to fall back to their previous, whatever was implementation of change, it always resorts back to the normalcy. So I say 30 days, just knowing that, wow, if you have 3, then you can just hammer it out a little bit at a time. So key takeaways, ask yourself the cash flow questions. Oh, yeah, I'm interrupting. You were supposed to do this one.
You're fine. I don't know if you guys
No,
can
no, I
tell at
won't
all,
stop talking. It's
but Brian
awful.
and I are incredibly passionate about cash flow. So hopefully you can see that coming across. I think some of the big things here is, like you said, is we just need to pause for a moment and simplify. And so I think the three questions is the first thing. Let's identify, and if it's all three, let's go ahead and write them all down, and then we can prioritize them. So I think I
Absolutely.
already envision like make the list of all three questions, and then ultimately make some lists of underneath, and then we can go back and prioritize them. The 2 to 3 leaders is really important. I also wanted to express they don't have to be in your business, right? Some of you may say, I
Right.
don't have somebody else that currently is in my business that I feel comfortable sharing this with. That's okay. You can reach out to other folks, whether it's other business owners, someone that you trust. I think that helps a lot also to have someone's outside perspective to give a different, it doesn't have to be outside, but I think that that's important to note. Also, those 5 E's that you'll get the PDF of these slides, and that's a great slide to kind of put up. I already told Brian, I'm like, I'm going to put it up at my desk to kind of help me be thinking through some of the solutions. And then I would put those on the calendar. That 1 hour that you're focusing on improving cash flow in your business is going to have a huge return for your business if you can put the focus towards that. And so we definitely want to do that. And then, like you said, just keep scheduling those times to be able to commit to it. So this is just hopefully some tips you can use right away in your business. And if you're interested in kind of attending the course or getting some more information, we'd also love to invite you to enroll. The course again will be the 15th and the 16th. And there's lots more information on our site. Again, we'll get more information about the course in your follow-up email. But like Brian said, we'd love to be able to hear from you and hear any questions that you might have. So feel free to throw any of those in the chat, or raise your hand and we'd be happy to make you have the opportunity to speak. Just so you know, we're
Yeah.
going to stop the recording now so that you can feel free to ask any questions you want, and those won't be broadcasted out for all to hear. So feel free if you'd like to. And we're definitely open to that. And thank you so much. I know some of you will have to jump off and get back to your busy stores and start working on your solutions. So anyone who would like to throw out a question, we'd love to hear it. And thank you all so much again for attending.
Yeah. Thank you.